Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Hey everyone, it's the What Podcast. On Women's Hoops and Talks, we are elevating the voice of women in basketball. The What Podcast is part of the Almighty Baller Radio Network, and we're also part of Blazers Edge, which is the SB Nation site all about the Portland Trailblazers. Today we have a great interview with Jannelle Moore. She writes for Blue Man Hoops and Golden State of Mind, and for me, she brought a really great perspective about one of the greatest teams possibly that the NBA has ever known. And I really needed to hear her perspective about a team which has sort of gotten giant status. But before we go on, I want to bring in my co-host Kendyl. Hey Kendyl, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. Wet. It is very wet here in Oregon right now.
Yeah.
Rode my bike
Not
home.
wet where I am.
It's wet?
Not wet at all. It's not wet where I am.
Oh, lucky you. Is it warm?
Yeah, it's pretty warm. I mean, it's been the past couple of days, it's been in the 70s and 80s.
Oh
so
my gosh.
It's up there. Yeah, right now I think it's in the 60s, but it's 7 o'clock right now, so it's late.
So you're now down in Southern California.
I am. I'm in Burbank, so right outside of Los Angeles.
And soon there will be a very big event coming down to Southern California. The All-Star Game is going to be in Los Angeles this year.
It is. I know. I'm so excited to be here with it happening. I think that's going to be really exciting. And speaking of the All-Star Game, today is Thursday, which is the day that the All-Star captains and starters are announced. So Tara and I, why don't we go over kind of what we think the pitch should be, and then we can check out what the actual roster is, and then we can kind of compare and contrast our picks versus the actual voting.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm sure mine are completely off base.
I feel pretty good about mine. I've been pretty close most years, so
I always vote with my heart, which is completely different from logic. So we'll see how it goes. Do you want to go first? Who are your picks? Let's start with let's start with the West.
So for the West, I'm gonna go with for my backcourt, I'm gonna go with Steph Curry and James Harden. I think that Steph is definitely gonna get the captain spot. I don't think anyone really can argue with that. And then as far as front court goes, I'm going to go with Kevin Durant and Anthony Davis right off the bat, which I think those four right there are kind of locked in. I think most people, it's pretty much guaranteed those four are going to be there. It's that fifth spot that I think is kind of up in the air. And I'm going to go with LaMarcus Aldridge for that. So not a Portland popular opinion, but I think that with what he's been doing this season, keeping the Spurs as one of the top Western Conference teams with Kawhi, who's their best player, and having him not be there and having LaMarcus be able to kind of still keep that team going, I think that speaks a lot on him, and I think he's been playing a lot more like he used to play in Portland, and which he hasn't been doing the past couple of seasons. So I definitely think he deserves to get that fifth and final starting spot.
Yeah, I absolutely cannot argue with any of them, although mine are quite different because mine was purely emotional. You'll be happier with my East selections, I think, because they were much more logical. But I was like, you know what? This is my conference. I'm going to just go with my heart on this one. So the first person that I chose for a guard was Damian Lillard. Now, obviously, that's a sentimental pick. It's hard because there are just so many guards that are so good in the West. But I can't not vote for him. That having been said, he's been playing injured, and it totally would worry me if he would be playing in the All-Star game. I would actually rather have him rest. But I love him, and I want him to have my vote. The other guard is Harden, so we're alike on there. And we're also the same with the front court. I went with Anthony Davis. But then here's where it goes all wackadoodle, because I voted for Karl Anthony Towns. You know, I'm really mixed. I have mixed feelings about him this year because sometimes I think he should be doing more, and I'm like, is this? But then when you look at sort of the whole picture of how much Minnesota has come forward, and I know Jimmy Butler is a large part of that, but Karl Anthony Towns, I think right now is still kind of the heart of that team, and I just wanted him to have it, have my vote on that one. And then the final spot. This is really silly, but Steven Adams. I could watch. I can't get enough watching Steven Adams, and I would just love the chance to watch him in the All-Star game, just because I enjoy watching him so much. His attitude and his body posture and everything about watching him play, I think is just so entertaining, and I would just love to see him play in the All-Star game. So Dame, Harden, Cat, AD, and Steven Adams are my totally emotional choices for the West Coast. How about you? Who do you have for the East?
The East. So my backcourt for the East, I'm going to go with Kyrie Irving and DeMar DeRozan. I think that's kind of set. I don't think anyone really is going to argue that a whole lot. And then front court wise, obviously LeBron and Giannis. And then that fifth spot, again, that's kind of the same as the Western Conference. It's that fifth spot that's kind of up in the air. I'm going to go with Al Horford, which I think he's very underrated. Not underrated. I think people don't give him, just underrated. I don't think people give him the credit he deserves. When people talk about the Celtics, they talk about Kyrie. They don't talk about Al at all. And when you actually watch the Celtics play, you realize how much he's doing. Like, he's doing so much for that team, and he's just kind of forgotten about because of Kyrie, and he's not he's not in the media all the time. He's not as but I definitely think he deserves that starting spot. And if he doesn't get the starting spot, I definitely think he will be an all-star this year.
Okay, awesome. So for my East picks, we're actually quite close on these. And the way I went about selecting my Eastern Conference players is I just went straight up for the numbers. And I went to Basketball Reference, and I called all the front court, or I called up guards, and then I called up absolutely everybody else, and I just looked at win shares. And then I decided to throw out Kyrie because I'm not a huge fan of Kyrie, and I'd rather have Victor Oladipo. So otherwise, we're the same. I went with your guy, DeMar DeRozan. And instead of Kyrie, I picked out Oladipo. Now, DeMar DeRozan has the highest win shares and at 6.3, and he's followed by Kyrie at 6, and then right after that is Oladipo. And Oladipo scores slightly more points per game than Kyrie, and he has a higher PER than Kyrie. So I thought that was enough to maybe just give him the edge to justify me putting him in instead of Kyrie. Because I'm absolutely loving how well Oladipo's doing, and how initially that Paul trade looked like it was so one-sided, but it turns out these guys are really fitting in beautifully in Indiana. So I wanted to give him a little extra props for, coming in with all that baggage and doing so well with it. And then I was the same with the front court, Giannis and LeBron, obviously. And then, Al Horford has just been like kind of quietly excellent all year. You know what I mean? He just does what he needs to do with a team that is very flexible, has a lot of options. He just manages to make his way and hold it all down. And I appreciate that about him. So I was happy to put him in the mix as well. So, but I know that, so I haven't seen the list and I know it just came out. So do you have it and should we compare how we did?
I do. Yeah. Let me pull it up real fast. Okay. So let's do the East first. Since we were just talking about that. So the captain is obviously LeBron James.
Oh, he did. Okay, good.
No surprise.
Because for right at the beginning, Giannis was leading with the international votes, I think.
Yeah.
But all is right with the world. LeBron will be captain.
Yeah. And then the backcourt is going to be Kyrie and DeMar DeRozan. Got that. And then we have Giannis and then Joel Embiid.
Really?
Took that 5th spot. Yeah, he snuck in there. He got that 5th starting spot.
Wow. I wonder if that was based on I wonder on the strength of which voting block.
Yeah, so let me pull that up. I actually just had that. Okay, here we go. So it says like what the player rank or what the rank was. So for the Eastern Conference, if it were up to the fans, Joel Embiid got it. If it was up to the players, it would be Kristaps Porzingis.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and if it were up to the media, it looks like it would also be Joel Embiid for media as well, if I'm reading this correct. Some of these are tied, so
that's so interesting. Yeah. I stayed off of Twitter all afternoon because I didn't want to know what the results were because it's impossible to not see that kind of stuff. So now I can't wait to listen to all the pettiness about so who should or shouldn't have votes and who's allowed to vote and who's not allowed to vote, and what they always have people who get a couple of random votes for the players that nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah. It also says, so as far as the guards go, so in the East, for fan, player, and media, the top 2 were exactly the same. Kyrie got first among all 3 of those categories, and DeMar got second. So, and then the third was Victor Oladipo for player and media, but fans voted him third, or him fourth, and then third for fan voting was Ben Simmons.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, how'd we do in the West?
The West, okay. So the captain is Steph Curry.
Okay.
And then we have the other guard is James Harden. And then the front court is Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and that 5th spot is DeMarcus Cousins.
Really? I considered Boogie. I was going between Boogie and Steven Adams for just pure entertainment value. Do you think that's what everybody did?
Maybe. I don't know. Let's see. So looking at the rate. So among fans, Draymond Green should have been in there if it were up to fans. The top 3, if it were, I'll do it this way. Top 3 for fan, player, media. So the top 3 for fans were Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and Anthony Davis. Then among players, it was Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and DeMarcus Cousins. And then media was Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and LaMarcus Aldridge.
Wow. That is really interesting. That's a lot of variation. Very interesting.
Yeah, and then guards was kind of interesting. This is where it's real interesting with, I feel like the West for guards is always so different among player and media than fans. That's always the biggest difference. So if it were up to fans, it would be Steph Curry and Ginobili.
Oh, good
so
old
those
man
were the top
Manu.
2. Yeah, so I'll actually do the top 4 because I find that kind of interesting. It would be, among fans, so it's Steph Curry, Ginobili, James Harden, then Russell Westbrook. If it were up to the media, it would be James Harden, then Steph Curry, then Russell Westbrook, then Jimmy Butler. And if we're up to players, it would be Steph Curry, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Damian
Oh,
Lillard.
I'm so glad Damian at least got in there with somebody.
Yeah. So as of right now, because they base it off of the overall like
Mhm.
weighted rank right now, Dame is 1, 2, 3, 4. He's
Mhm.
seventh in the
Mhm.
West. So it goes Steph Curry, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Manu Ginobili, Klay Thompson, Chris Paul, then Lillard, Butler, Devin Booker, and Lonzo
I am
Ball.
so glad he finished above Lonzo Ball. That was like a ridiculous.
Yes.
That was a ridiculous moment in time where Lonzo Ball was beating out Damian Lillard. Well, that's awesome. How
Well,
fun.
among media, what's interesting is among media, Lonzo Ball and Damian Lillard tied. Among fans, Lonzo got higher, and among players, Dame got way higher. Dame among players, so among media, they both got seventh. Among fans, Lonzo got sixth, Damian got eight, and among players, Damian got fourth, and Lonzo got 13th.
Well,
So that says a lot.
yes, it does. I'm going to be like clearing out all of my media podcasts and be listening to players only and road tripping from now on. Oh, well, the media is going to be talking about this nonstop, I'm sure, for the next 48 hours. So we should probably move on to a different topic. We talked about to Jannelle, and I brought it up briefly that she brought a really interesting perspective because, you know, as Blazer fans, it feels like every playoff just ends with us getting just like chewed up and spit out by the team from the Bay Area. So much so that I can even just barely even get myself to say their name. And so it was really interesting to hear from someone who clearly, you know, loves the team and just like has kind of a history of having followed them for a while and had a lot to say.
So we talked to Jannelle about the different outlets that she writes for covering the Warriors, and she talks about where you can find that writing. We also talked to her about how the Warriors have developed over the past few years and how their stars like Steph and Draymond, who've been there from the beginning, have kind of started from the bottom and helped build that team up to where they are today. So let's go ahead and bring in Jannelle. Well, welcome to the podcast, Jannelle, and thank you so much for joining us today. So first, can you tell us a little bit about what you do while covering the Warriors?
All right, I write for two fan sites for the Warriors. One is Golden State of Mind, and that's, you know, the SB Nation group of fan sites. And I also write for Blue Man Hoop. And for Blue Man Hoop, I host this weekly column called Town's Finest. Now, for Golden State of Mind, I basically get in where I fit in. You know, I could do like analysis or Warrior Wonder. Or
is there a particular? Oh, I was just going to ask if there's a particular type of story or particular types of coverages that you like to write.
Well, I like my Town's Finest pretty good because it's a summary of all of the games of the week, and you know, I have a little bit of creative fun with it, especially with the first few opening paragraphs of it. But I would really like to delve deeper into analysis. I want to see how much I really know in this game and how much I need to learn. You know, my knowledge is okay, you know, is solid, but I can always improve. And that's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. So how did you first get started writing about basketball?
Well, it happened organically because I used to play basketball and watched it ever since I was a kid. And, you know, my major at North Carolina A&T was journalism. And when I was working for the campus newspaper, I was writing, you know, about sports anyway. I've covered a couple of girls' basketball games while I was down there, and a volleyball game here and a football game there. But, you know, since I've played basketball, I gravitated towards that and wanting to write about basketball. You know.
So the Warriors are kind of one of those teams that people either love or hate. And especially recently, there's a lot of people around the league who are not fans of the Warriors. So what do you think that people don't understand about them or don't really appreciate them as a team?
I'll start with understand. What people don't understand about the Warriors is that to get where they are now, it was a process. Steph, Clay, and Draymond, they were all drafted by the team. Draymond was drafted in the second round and was a backup to David Lee. And, all three of these guys had to work to get where they are. It ain't no super team. They just work and work to get to the level that they're at presently. What made them a super team is when KD joined. And even with that, Golden State and KD rumors was going on ever since like 2014, 2013. So it didn't just happen July the 4th. I mean, it happened, way before that. The recruiting process was way before that. And way before Game 7 of the finals. They've been trying to, lure KD to the Warriors for a while.
I have a question, Jannelle, about that. Was it always KD that they talked about coming, or before he actually ended up coming, were there other players that were like strong, that were really in the discussion for people that Golden State might go out and get, or was it always just they needed KD?
It wasn't just KD that they were after. There was DeAndre Jordan.
No.
DeAndre Jordan, Dwight Howard. But who's going to turn down one of the most prolific scorers in the game today? If he want to come, if he want to come to the team, let him. And the thing with KD is that he really wanted people that he could hoop with. He said so in Rolling Stone magazine. He felt that the way that Golden State's offense is set up, it was the best decision for him. And so far, he's right, And what people don't understand about KD is that, he really do not care about the leader and who's the alpha and all of that. He is a guy that just want to play basketball, period. Mm-hmm. And not being bothered with a bunch of politics and mess. Why do you think that he don't want to be the all-star captain? Because he don't want to be bothered with it. He just want to play ball.
Oh, that is so interesting. Is that I hadn't really thought about him not wanting to have to go through the picking process. Is that something that people are talking about?
Yeah, they was talking about it last week. Steph wants to be the captain.
Huh, wonder if they can set up some kind of proxy system.
I don't know, but Steph wants to be the captain, and I have a theory as to why. I think, despite his MVPs and despite his championships, deep down, Steph feel like he has something to prove to his peers. And what's going to be interesting is if he ends up being a captain after tonight, who is he going to pick? Will he be petty and pick the players that he knows resent him just to be petty? Or will he pick KD and any Warrior available? That's interesting to find out.
Mm-hmm. I think that'll be interesting no matter who the captain is. I think just seeing that process is, well, we won't see that process. We'll just see the end results. But I think that will still be kind of an interesting thing to look at. Well, anyway, so obviously the Warriors are the reigning champions in the league. They're one of the top teams. How do teams come in and beat this? Like, how do they beat a team that's so dominant like that?
See, the thing about the Warriors is that they play up and play down to the competition. That's why you see the Charlotte Hornets of the league, the Clippers of the league, the Kings, beat them. Because the Warriors tend to play down to the competition and they tend to get sloppy.
Has that always been the case, or is that something new this year?
It's kind of always been the case, but, their biggest quarter is the third quarter. And they tend to make the adjustments after the half and end up blowing the teams out.
So
but
do you
is that team? You have to keep on them. You have to keep that defensive pressure on them and force them into the turnovers and also win the 50-50 balls. That's what the Clippers did. I was disgusted last week, seeing the Clippers and Austin Rivers and Patrick Beverley and, a lot of starters were missing. The Warriors were out hustled by those Clippers.
Yeah, you got to give the Clippers some respect for what they've put together the last few weeks. It's kind of like, who are any of the people who are playing for the Clippers right now? It's kind of amazing, I think.
It's a makeshift lineup. I don't know what's wrong with Rivers, and I don't know what's wrong with Patrick Beverley per se, but, a lot of their starters are missing.
Well, Patrick Beverley's out for the season, and then Austin Rivers is hopefully only out like another week or so, I think.
So, it's been an interesting couple of years for coaches in the league. Last year was a season where no coaches were fired, and then this year there's already been 2 firings in the league, and it got us to thinking, remembering what was it like when Mark Jackson was fired, and then when Steve Kerr took over? What do you recall from that period of time?
I recall how the players reacted. Mark had the trust of most of the players in that locker room, specifically Steph. And Steph kind of fought for Mark to keep his job. And the fans, I don't remember that much about, how the fans reacted. But what I do know is that, Mark, he meant well, and he was responsible for the formation of the Warriors, but he was too ISO heavy. And that was some of the issues that some fans had with him. It was his philosophies and his religious beliefs. He's a minister.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And when Steph had those ankle troubles, it was at a church service. He anointed Steph's ankles.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, there's this book called Golden, The Miraculous Rise of Stephen Curry. It's by Marcus Thompson. He works for The Athletic. It's a good book. What I just told you, that's in there.
Okay.
Check it out. It's very good.
So it sounds like you're saying that Mark Jackson did a lot of like kind of the fundamental player development for when those guys first came in.
Yeah.
What was it like when when Steph Curry first came in? What do you remember about or even Draymond or Clay? Like, what were some of the things that they really had to work on and improve before people really believed that they were the real deal?
Draymond had to work on losing some weight. And he just kept, he did. He was drafted. It was kind of heavy when he was drafted in the second round. But Draymond just continued to work. And, he was ready. He kept himself ready. He worked on his basketball IQ. And when he replaced David Lee in the lineup, it was almost seamless. And after he replaced David Lee in the lineup, he just began to just grow, specifically on the defensive end. He knew that he wasn't going to be a contributor to offense consistently, but he found a niche with defense. And that's why he is where he is, because he knows his lane and he stays in it for the most part. But he want to continue to grow. And that's how he evolved into the reigning defensive player of the year. With Steph, he just had to, continue to get stronger, especially coming off of the injuries he came off of. And he just continued to work out with this trainer in Charlotte, Accelerate. And he's been working out with that group ever since 2013 or 14. His trainer, Brandon Payne, works out in the Bay with him as well.
Now, did Steph Curry always show, like when you saw him come to Golden State, did you see the potential right away?
I saw the potential in Davidson when he hung up 44 against North Carolina State and LeBron was in attendance. And when he went to Golden State, there was some potential there. He was runner-up to Tyreke Evans for Rookie of the Year. I mean, the potential was there, but, him and Monte Ellis, kind of like clashed or whatever. And plus, there was an injury-riddled year that really robbed Steph of maybe a good season and a half before, coming into his prime. But, I mean, it was always there. But the thing with Steph, a lot of people just see what he's doing now and saying that, well, he ain't really been good until now, but that's not so. This is the same guy who took the Spurs to like 6 games in 2013 with Jarrett Jack, and Draymond at the time was coming off the bench. Clay wasn't an all-star yet. The potential was there, but it was just a matter of him just to keep working and working until he could have a healthy season and to really break through.
And what about Clay? How has he changed?
He hasn't really changed much per se. But one underrated thing about Clay is his defense, and that defense was sorely lacking last week against the Clippers. That's what people don't really notice about Clay.
So, you touched on this a little bit about how KD isn't a big fan of being, or he doesn't want to be the captain of the All-Star team. He doesn't want to be maybe in that leadership position. But a lot of people think he's kind of come into the Warriors and almost made it his team rather than Steph's. What do you kind of feel on that? Do you think it's definitely Steph's team still?
That's still Steph's team. Because see, what fans like to do, a lot of fans really don't care that much for Steph anyway. And they're not really here for KD, but they trying to pit those two against each other, and that's not so. Steph makes the team go, and that's the bottom line. And you could see it in their offensive numbers. Even though they're winning, their offense was stagnant, no floor spacing, no gravitational pull, none of that. Steph makes it possible. And KD will tell you that right now. And it's a shame that KD had to tell reporters and fans to respect Steph after the finals. Steph nearly averaged a triple-double in the finals last year, but that was overlooked because of KD's numbers. But how did KD's numbers get that way? Because Cleveland was so afraid of Steph going off behind the arc, they would rather give up dunks to KD.
So do you think that Steph really is that disrespect? I mean, he's the top vote getter for the All-Star game right now. So do you think he really is that disrespected in the league, or
among the peers and fans that don't know any better? And there's a lot of them on Twitter. And to be quite honest, they get on my nerves, and I try to stay in my own lane and not try to get into arguments. But you could see it, right? You could see their offense is like night and day with Steph out of the lineup. Steph is a big part of what they do. Period. KD, I have my thoughts is that they are dominant players, but they dominate in different ways. They're both dominant, but it's different ways that they dominate. And I think KD's dominance is more acceptable in some fan site versus Steph's, because they still think Steph is just a shooter, and that's not true. He has worked on his inside game. He's shooting over 60% in the paint, mid-range, but people see what they want to see.
I want to go back to one thing that you said about Twitter, because I think it's really interesting, because everybody has an opinion and everybody has a take on the Golden State Warriors. How do you think that Twitter has Twitter enhanced your appreciation and enjoyment of basketball, and are there ways that it takes away from that?
It hasn't enhanced a thing. but it hasn't really diminished my appreciation of basketball because I've grown to. I mean, the game is in me.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I was 3 years old, my grandma on my dad's side bought me my first basketball.
Your grandmother did?
Yes.
So it passed down through the women?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. My aunt played. Both of my aunts on my dad's side played basketball. My dad played basketball.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about how you became a fan of basketball and, how you played basketball as a kid
And in my neighborhood there was like only 3 girls on the block. I was 1 out of 3, and I just gravitated towards playing basketball and playing football.
What position did you play? Did you have a preferred?
I played forward, and I had no business. I played the 4, and I had no business playing the 4 when I was in high school.
Why is that?
My natural position is a 2.
Okay.
Because
You're a
I
good
was
shooter?
not tall enough to bang, in the paint with those taller girls. But you can't tell coaches anything. Some of them.
Did you ever have any coaches that really inspired or motivated you?
Nah.
No, you just were out there playing the game,
I was playing the game I love. I didn't need any motivation or inspiration by my coaches. I mean, I respected my coaches, but I loved the game.
It was already there.
Right. I didn't need any extra motivation to get me up to play.
So you've been watching the game since you were really, really young. What are some of the things that you've seen change about the game that either you really liked or didn't like?
I really liked, when I was really growing up, when I was really young, I had a birthday last week.
Oh, happy birthday.
I'm in my 30s. And, I remember watching the evolution of the Bulls with Michael Jordan, Showtime Lakers, Barkley when he was with the 76ers, Dominique Wilkins, all of those guys. And the game was more physical then. You had hand checks. I mean, they really went after each other. And then it got a little bit too glossy, a little bit too sanitized. And when I hit college, I actually kind of got bored of watching the game. And, my studies was my biggest priority and my distraction.
And you studied journalism, and you said you always wanted to cover sports. Is that correct?
I thought about it, but, my mom kept telling me over and over and over again that I should cover sports because I seem to get into it. And, I have knowledge. I have knowledge and input, and I can put my knowledge and my input up against anybody that's even on the air today. Don't have that opportunity. And it's a shame because, there are some people that shouldn't even be on the air. I'm talking like people like Colin Cowherd. I believe he even said that, he don't even watch games. He just piggyback off of other people's opinion. If that's true, why are you on the air? How did you really get your job?
What would be your dream job?
What would be my dream job?
Yeah.
I got 2 of them. I would like to be a producer of a sports show because producers are the gatekeepers and they are of influence. But I would also like to report because, again, I think I could do a good job. I even say I could do a better job than some of these people out here now.
So who are some of the people that you really do like out there right now?
I like Ross Golden Woody.
Okay.
I like Karis Burke, and I like most of the women reporters, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because they work hard to get that story, and they are about as fair and balanced as the men, or even fairer, even more fair and balanced. They are not for a bunch of hot takes and all of that stuff. And I think it's ridiculous. And the way that some of these male reporters go on and on about people like Brady, in football, and, LeBron James and basketball, I say, you know what? They are like groupies with a pen and a microphone. That's exactly what they project themselves to be, especially Nick Wright.
You wrote a piece about LeBron earlier this year, as I recall. You want to talk a little bit about that, and we can link to those in the show notes here for people to read and enjoy.
My piece about LeBron was for Bleacher Report, and that was to compare and contrast the hype that Lonzo Ball is getting to, LeBron's rookie debut.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though Lonzo has his hype, LeBron's hype was by far more than Lonzo's. And LeBron has lived up to the hype, whether you like him or not. And he still continued to live up to his hype to this day. Even though I'm a Warriors fan, I do appreciate and respect what LeBron has contributed to the game of basketball. Appreciate that. But there are some Warrior fans that just really go in on LeBron, and that's not really fair either.
Other than LeBron, who are some other non-Warriors that you appreciate watching?
I appreciate watching Damian Lillard.
Hey, I know him. I mean, I don't know him, but we're Blazer fans.
I appreciate watching Damian. He is so underrated and underappreciated, and he continues to fight. He continues to be competitive, and I admire that about him. He's from Oakland, and I think that's part of. I mean, that's his mentality, and he carries that mentality on the court. And I like CJ. CJ, I have a soft spot for CJ because, he's in the media, he's in, journalism, and I like his takes. And I really like the idea of him rating the national media. I think he should have a parody. I think, the basketball players should, whoever he could dig up should film a parody, them being analysts, analyzing the reporters, really criticizing their work, like the reporters criticize the players. I think that would be a good skit.
I can totally picture that. That would be really funny.
That would be hilarious. And the players could mock the national reporters. Now, my affinity is with the regional reporters because, they're not hot takey. And, they really are locked in on the team. And the broadcast team that I like, besides NBC Sports Bay Area, is Fox Sports Southeast. Eric Collins, Stephanie Reddy, and Dale Curry are remarkable on the air. And they call it like they see it, either for the Hornets or against it. And, they're not on that hot take mess. And a lot of regional sports aren't. And I just commend all of them.
I'll have to check one out, their broadcasts out, because this week League Pass is free. So I will tune in. They cover the Hornets, correct?
Yes, they do. They play the Wizards tomorrow, Wednesday, I think.
Perfect. We'll have to check them out. Kendyl, do you have any last questions that for us to end up with?
No. Sorry, my page is kind of like freaking out on me a little bit, so I can't see the list of questions. So if I'm missing something,
technical difficulties. Yeah. That has been the hallmark of this particular episode, hasn't it, ladies? We are powering through. We're going to get this done. Well, Jannelle, one thing that we usually end up with when we do these interviews is we ask you about who's a woman who you admire in basketball and why.
Yeah, covering basketball or,
it can be in any format. It could be your grandma who gave you your first hoop, or it could be One of the women you've already mentioned who covers just, because part of what we want to do with the podcast is expose, give voice to other women who are doing stuff and expose our listeners to other women out there doing awesome stuff.
I admire Roz and her progression in covering sports and how thorough she is. And also Sharon Brown, she covers the Memphis Grizzlies. And, the way that she works, she works and she hustles. And I just admire that,
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's got to be but it's such an interesting point in time how everything is changing and the job of covering sports has changed so much. I would hazard to guess over the last.
And it has changed. It has changed a lot. And I admire The Athletic. I think they got it figured out. Because there are some people like me that is not feeling a bunch of ads and a lot of hot takes and hyperbole, and willing to subscribe for it. And that way that cuts out ads and, stuff. And when they come to the Carolinas, I'm going to be on their helmets and say, hey, give me a shot. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, I hope you get that shot. We will hope that The Athletic comes soon, and we look forward to seeing your name as a byline. Keep in touch and let us know when that happens, because your writing's really nice. You tell great stories. I really have enjoyed the town's finest column, and we'll link to that too for people who want to check out some of your other writing. But Jannelle, thank you so much for joining us. We really have spent several days trying to make the technology work. For some reason, this has been just a really tough one to record, but you've been so accommodating and so gracious as we try to make it all work. I just really, really appreciate your time.
I understand, things happen, and it is what it is, and I've had the time, and I just appreciate you thinking that much of me to be a guest on your show. I really appreciate that, and I am humbled.
We are very glad to have you. Oh, and before we sign off, why don't you tell people how, again, where they can find your work and what your social media handle is if they want to follow you.
Okay. You can find my work at Blue Man Hoop and Golden State of Mind. My Town's Finest column usually runs every Sunday, but right now I'm a little bit behind. That's about the second time it happened. And my Twitter handle is Jannelle12. And that's about all. Oh, my Instagram is Writer Diva. So there you go.
Ooh, how do you spell that?
WRITERDIVA.
Writer Diva. Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jannelle.
Thank you.
So that's going to do it for us today. If you like what you heard, you can find more episodes of the What podcast in the Blazers Edge podcast feed. Head over to Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to Blazers Edge. You'll get all the weekly Blazer Edge podcasts, plus every other week we'll bring you another episode of Women's Hoops and Talks, and you'll get to know even more women who are doing awesome things in basketball. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Hoops and Talks. I'm at Kendyl Bennett 16, and Tara is at TCB Bids.